Seth Rollins has been one of the best wrestlers in WWE over the last decade, it feels like. From his run with The Shield, to his time with The Authority, the Kingslayer, the Messiah, and even now with the Monday Night Rollins gimmick as the World Heavyweight Champion. Seth Rollins has found new ways to re-innovate himself and come back stronger and better. But there seems to be a constant problem following him every single time he is given the reins to become the champion and lead a brand or the company as the face. It's that Seth Rollins simply is not good enough to be the guy. It seems like every single time he becomes the champion, whether it's the World Heavyweight run that he's on now or the World Championship run that he had the first time after cashing in on Roman Reigns in the main event of WrestleMania, that there's always somebody else that's overshadowing him as a champion or superstar in general, or the overall reign is just bad and fans turn on him. Currently right now, Seth Rollins is the World Heavyweight Champion, and in my opinion, he's having a pretty solid reign, but there's things about it that definitely could be better, and a lot of fans are picking up on it now more than ever. But to understand a lot of these problems with his current World Heavyweight Championship reign, we have to go back to the beginning, when Seth Rollins cashed in that Money in the Bank briefcase.
Cover by Rollins! Rollins with the title! Rollins with the title! Rollins with the heist of the century!
Seth Rollins cashed in the Money in the Bank on Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar in the main event of WrestleMania. There's very few ways to kick off a WWE Heavyweight Championship reign better than that. Rollins was basically handpicked by Triple H to be his right-hand man and pupil of his eye over the past year, and when he cashed in on Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar, it was actually a surprise that a lot of us should have saw coming, but because Roman Reigns was the chosen one, a lot of people assumed it just wasn't gonna happen, or if it was, he was gonna cash in and lose. But thankfully he was able to cash in, and he went on an 8-month reign with the championship. Rollins had some pretty good matches in that reign. Despite being booked as the chicken shit heel, it worked with the Authority. Matches with Randy Orton, Dean Ambrose, John Cena, Brock Lesnar, I thought were the highlights of his reign. Now of course you do have some of the lowlights, like the match with Kane, and to be honest, that whole feud was a disaster. But despite his booking as a character kind of being up and down, especially being booked as a coward world champion, Rollins was still able to go out there night after night and deliver high quality matches with just about anyone on the roster. Unfortunately though, Seth Rollins was not the best champion in WWE around this time. It was actually John Cena. For those who don't know, John Cena was doing his open challenge with the United States Championship, and he was also delivering banger matches every single week. The man went out there with guys like Stardust, Wade Barrett, Dean Ambrose, Cesaro, and he consistently delivered every single night. And despite Seth Rollins being technically the man in WWE with the top title, let's be serious, we all know this was the reign of John Cena still. Cena may have had a secondary title, but he made that title the title in WWE. I mean, think about it, the US title hasn't had a lot of highlights over the last 10 to 15 years, but that reign is something that everybody remembers. And that's not to take away from what Seth Rollins was doing with the top title, but unfortunately, maybe it was because he was a heel at the time, nobody really saw him as the man. And you could say, hey, he was young, he was on the rise, but even if you want to have that young on the rise conversation, even back then we knew that Seth Rollins wasn't the chosen one. It was Roman Reigns. I mean, the only reason he's the champion is because they had to call an audible at WrestleMania due to the fans not being ingratiated with Roman. Unfortunately though, for Seth Rollins, a lot of these questions remained unanswered, at least for the time being, because he did suffer an injury to end his championship reign. Trying to do a sunset flip powerbomb, and then he tore his MCL and ACL in his left knee. I remember feeling so bad for Seth Rollins, and even a lot of fans, when he relinquished the championship, they were sad. But hey, considering that Seth Rollins was always on the shows every single week, and a lot of the fans really wanted to cheer him, you would think that once he comes back, he's gonna be the biggest babyface on the roster.
Oh my God! It's Seth Rollins! It's Seth Rollins! A pedigree! Seth Rollins is back!
In May 22nd, 2016, Roman Reigns was having a match with AJ Styles, one of the best matches all year, by the way. And after the match, Seth Rollins came back and pedigreed Roman Reigns in the middle of the ring and got a monster reaction. You would think the WWE had just created their next big babyface over the next decade. I mean, despite Roman Reigns technically being the babyface, we all know how that story ended there. Nobody wanted to cheer that man despite him being booked as a white meat babyface. So Seth Rollins coming back back and being the babyface, with Roman Reigns eventually turning heel, I assumed. Haha, silly me, yeah I know, but still, I thought that was something they were gonna go in the direction of. It seemed like such an obvious solution. Unfortunately though, they didn't go with that direction and they decided to keep Seth Rollins as a heel. It was a very puzzling decision. He would come out and get these babyface reactions, but yet he would still come out and shit on the crowd as a heel. It was so weird and lame, and the fact that WWE didn't capitalize off of his immediate momentum as a babyface was the definition of poor execution. I mean, sure, Seth Rollins didn't have to come back and immediately start being happy-go-lucky with the fans, but it's not like we didn't know he was gonna turn babyface anyways, and guess how long it took for him to do so? 4 whole months. 4 whole damn months. And in between that time, he was feuding with some of the top baby faces in the company like Dean Ambrose and Finn Balor. So a lot of that momentum that he had as a top babyface coming in fresh off the injury, it was basically all dissipated. And sure, the fans still liked Seth Rollins when he turned babyface, but once again, it was just a missed opportunity to take advantage of a lot of momentum that he already had. Now I know Seth Rollins did win back the World Championship at Money in the Bank in 2016, but let's be serious, that doesn't really count as a reign in my opinion. It was for 1 day, not even a day actually, it was just for a couple of seconds due to Dean Ambrose cashing in that briefcase. I'm gonna be honest with you, looking back at that night, there are 2 reasons why Seth Rollins won that championship, and it isn't because WWE actually wanted to put the title on him. The first reason being that Roman Reigns failed a drug test, which led to him being suspended, so him losing that title had to happen regardless. And the second reason being that they wanted to have a night that all 3 members of the Shield held that World Heavyweight Championship. So honestly, Seth Rollins winning that title at that night just further proved that he was not the guy for the company. Now Rollins later that year went on to have some pretty kick-ass matches, and as we all know, Rollins got screwed in that fatal 4-way match on Raw for the Universal title that was vacant due to Balor's injury, and with Triple H interfering, it was very obvious that Triple H and Rollins was the planned match for WrestleMania going forward, which they built to over the next couple of months. I actually liked the build that they had with the Rollins and Triple H match, even though the match itself was kinda whatever to me. I liked the idea of Rollins going to the NXT TakeOver show, knowing that Triple H is the man over there and he runs things. And I also liked the segment they did on Raw with Seth Rollins about to go after Triple H, and then Samoa Joe appears out of nowhere and makes his Raw debut as Triple H's muscle. Now in my opinion, I've already said earlier, the match he had with Triple H at WrestleMania 33, it wasn't bad, but like I said, it was nothing special. Rollins was selling over a knee injury in the match, so he was pretty limited to what he could do. The only spot that really gets remembered is that Stephanie went through a table off of a Triple H accidental bump, and then Rollins officially gets that passing of the torch moment with Triple H beating him with his own move, the pedigree. Now let's fast forward a couple of years later, because in the meantime, Seth Rollins didn't really do anything concerning the World Championship, as he was relegated to being in the mid-card. Now he was definitely still one of the most popular acts, as we all know the Intercontinental Championship reign that he had, where he kind of ripped off the John Cena idea of the open challenge every week, but nonetheless it led to him being the best champion in the company at the time due to Brock Lesnar not being on the shows. Rollins built a lot of goodwill with the audience, being one of the most over baby faces in the company. I remember they even tried to do a Shield reunion a couple of times, but it fell flat due to Dean Ambrose getting injured. Then later on in October of 2018, Roman Reigns got leukemia, and that basically threw a wrench into all of their plans. But one thing that I did like in result of that was the Dean Ambrose heel turn. The Ambrose heel turn on Seth Rollins was something gradually building up over time, and sure, the result was pretty bad. They had a horrible match at TLC that was met with a lot of boos, and because of how bad Dean Ambrose heel turn was handled, it led to Dean Ambrose actually wanting out of the company. Now despite that heel turn not being handled well and that whole feud, to be honest, Rollins was still the prohibited favorite to win the Royal Rumble that year due to him being the most over babyface in the company on the men's side. And Rollins would go on to fulfill what a lot of people wanted for him that year, which is beat Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania for the Universal Championship. Unfortunately though, it didn't go the way I think a lot of people, including Seth Rollins, thought that moment would go for him. As I said earlier, he was the most popular babyface on the men's side. Like I said in the beginning of my video, anytime Seth Rollins becomes the man in WWE or is pushed in that direction, there's usually somebody else that's preoccupying that spot, and this time it actually wasn't a male superstar, it was his wife Becky Lynch. Becky was on an incredible run that year and was the most popular star in the company. And if it wasn't for her getting as over as she did, Seth Rollins probably would have had a much better shot at main eventing WrestleMania that year, but he didn't really stand a chance. I mean, Seth won the Royal Rumble and he opened WrestleMania that year. I mean, I understand that Brock Lesnar wanted to go home as soon as possible, but damn. That was sad. But nonetheless though, Rollins was the main champion on the men's side. And throughout that reign, he had some pretty good matches. One of my favorite matches of all time is the Seth Rollins and AJ Styles match at Money in the Bank that year. Unfortunately though, Rollins got himself in a little bit of trouble away from the ring that actually disrupted his championship reign. Rollins would consistently go on Twitter and put his foot in his mouth, like the whole interaction with him and Will Ospreay. It started off as a fun little back and forth between him and Will, but unfortunately Rollins had to talk about the money that he's making in WWE and saying that Ospreay doesn't compare. I mean, you've immediately lost the battle when you have to resort to the "my is bigger than yours" card. I mean, it was so dumb of Rollins to say that, to the point that Rollins even had to apologize afterwards, which shout out to Rollins, he could have just not said anything, but the apology at least showed some level of accountability on his part. Unfortunately though, that's not where it ended. Rollins had other comments not only about fans, but Dean Ambrose as well. As you can see on the screen, I have the quotes of Seth Rollins critiquing a lot of fans and their critiques of the product in a very rude and arrogant way. As here's a little part of the excerpt that he went on Sports Illustrated, saying, "The fact that people want to sit on their little soapboxes and their little stupid social media machines and talk down about it, it really speaks volumes about the generation and where they're at. And so I figured if somebody is going to fight back, it might as well be me, since I'm the champ and I consider myself the top guy in our company." He later goes on in the interview to talk about Dean Ambrose taking his ball and going home, and he even critiques Ambrose for criticizing the creative process system in WWE. And it's very crazy to me that Rollins would make these comments, because fans are the ones that built you up to the point that you were over enough to beat Brock Lesnar. I mean, obviously Seth Rollins is still great, but for him to shit on the fans the way he did in this interview, it rubbed a lot of people, including myself, the wrong way. The shows around that time were simply not good. Even your Universal Championship reign was not being booked very well. You had like 3 straight matches with Baron Corbin of all people, and that killed a lot of your momentum, especially considering how they handled the whole you and Becky Lynch being the man's man thing on TV. That was lame. Then to top things off, he had a horrible Hell in a Cell match with The Fiend. I mean, you talk about something that was just a bad idea from the beginning. Oh my god. The feud itself was already kind of lame. You had Seth Rollins literally destroying the Firefly Funhouse. That was whack as fuck. But the match itself didn't help anybody, especially considering that it ended in a disqualification. Rollins hit this guy with 1,000 curb stomps over and over and over again. It was boring as fuck. Then he hit him with a chair, a ladder, and then once a sledgehammer gets introduced, the referee says, "Hey, that's too far, I gotta call for the bell." So it's no surprise that the fans are going to hate all over the product when you're the champion, you're the top guy, and you're being booked like this. The fact of the matter is, your championship run had some good matches, but the storylines in your character was pretty damn lame. That's why in the latter half of your run, you were getting pretty mixed reactions. Mind you, Rollins was a babyface. He was supposed to lead the company as the face of the brand, and the company was going through all-time lows in viewership and ratings. It's not all Seth Rollins' fault, but you have to put some accountability on not only him as a champion, but him outside the ring as well as a person. He didn't represent himself or the company very well in the eyes of WWE fans, and it got so bad that as soon as he dropped that title to The Fiend in Saudi Arabia, they instantly had to turn him heel. And to be fair, Rollins did a pretty good job with the heel gimmick that they gave him, being the Monday Night Messiah. He had some pretty good matches and feuds along the way with guys like Kevin Owens, Samoa Joe, and even Dominic Mysterio at SummerSlam in the Thunderdome. That match surprised me, not only with how good Seth Rollins looked, but how good Dominic looked as well. Rollins had good matches with Buddy Murphy, and even when they left the Thunderdome, I really enjoyed the trio of matches that he had with Edge. His match with Roman Reigns at the Royal Rumble I thought was one of the best matches of Roman Reigns' title run so far, which is no surprise. Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins, they always have great matches. Then he went on to feud with Cody Rhodes, and of course we all know they had some great matches, including the Hell in a Cell match that's widely regarded as one of the best matches of all time, and for good reason. Rollins went on to have some pretty good feuds with guys like Matt Riddle and Austin Theory, Bobby Lashley. He even won the United United States Championship, and while he was the champion, he naturally turned into a babyface again. I mean, it had been years since the debacle at Hell in a Cell with The Fiend, so turning Rollins babyface, it just seemed like a natural thing to do at the time, which they did. And as we all know, Rollins continued to have great matches night in and night out, including the amazing match he had at WrestleMania with Logan Paul that I enjoyed, and even followed that up with one of the most shockingly good matches of the year with Omos at Backlash. Rollins had earned the right to get another shot with the top championship in the company, and that's why they put that new World Heavyweight Championship on Seth Rollins. Now, I will admit, when they announced that championship, I really wanted Finn Balor to win it, but it looked like they were making that title literally for Seth Rollins, and he deserved it. I mean, sure, when he had the reigns a couple of years back, he kind of fucked it up on his own merit, but he deserved the second chance with all the hard work that he was putting in the ring over time. Which leads us to where we are now. Seth Rollins is the World Heavyweight Champion. He's had some pretty good matches along the way, with guys on TV and on pay-per-view, whether it's guys like Damian Priest, Braun Breaker, the Finn Balor trilogy that I enjoyed a lot. And I may not have been a big fan of those Shinsuke Nakamura matches because I just couldn't buy into Shinsuke really winning the title, but a lot of people seem to enjoy their matches, especially their last man standing match, so that's a W for Seth. Unfortunately though, just like all of his other championship reigns, he is not the top guy in the company. Hell, he's not even the top guy on his brand. If you don't want to include Roman Reigns because he's not on the show all the time, even though I disagree, whatever, fine, let's put him to the side. He's not even the top guy on Raw for champions. It's Gunther. Gunther's been delivering every single night he steps onto the mat, and he's been doing it as champion a hell of a lot longer than Seth Rollins has. And hell, even if I remove Gunther, Seth Rollins isn't even the most over babyface in the company. Hell, he's not even the second most over babyface in the company right now. It's actually Jey Uso and LA Knight. Seth Rollins is supposed to be the man on Monday Night Raw as the top champion on that brand, but it really just feels like he's another great wrestler on Raw instead of the great wrestler on Raw. And I think the problem with Seth Rollins goes deeper than just how he's booked. I don't think Seth Rollins is really a great babyface. When he comes out, he says things that are pretty heelish, and he acts pretty heelish with that laugh. And sure, he gets babyface reactions. It's not like I'm saying you should turn him heel, but he's not really gonna ingratiate himself compared to other guys who have better stories and just flat out better characters that the audience can relate to. And that's been the story of Seth Rollins' entire career as the man in WWE. I look at Seth Rollins very similar to guys like Randy Orton, Edge, and Triple H. They had their moments where it looked like they could have been the top guy, but anytime that they were really given the reins to do so, it never really worked out. Now, I will say in the case of Edge, he never really got that opportunity, and when he did, they took the title off of him in a month. But in the case of guys like Randy Orton and Triple H, they had the reins to be the man for periods of time, but it never really worked out long term, especially in the case of Triple H, because that reign of terror is just so annoying looking back on it. Edge, Triple H, and Randy Orton, they are definitely the faces of their generation, not the face, but one of the faces, but they weren't ever really the guy in WWE. They were usually the guy that works with the guy. They worked with guys like John Cena, baby faces that were white hot like a Jeff Hardy, a Daniel Bryan, and because they were so great in the ring or with their character work as heels, they were able to get the best out of those feuds and matches, which is very similar to Seth Rollins. Rollins, in my opinion, will never really be the guy in WWE, and if you've heard interviews from him, he said that it eats him up alive all the time. He wants to main event a WrestleMania one day, and he does still have time to do it, but with the way wrestling fans are fickle, or just how popular guys can get over short periods of time, for example a guy like LA Knight, nothing is promised in wrestling, and Seth Rollins has experienced that firsthand. But hey, those are just my thoughts, you guys. I want to know what you guys think about Seth Rollins' career, and do you guys ever think he will be the man in WWE? How are you enjoying his World Heavyweight Championship reign so far? Let me know what you guys think down below in the comment section. This is your boy Omo Mustard signing out. You guys stay safe and have a blessed day. Peace.